Hey, it's John Stacy, coming to you from my car in front of a Sonic while I'm waiting for my order. And I just want to talk to you a little bit about a feedback loop that I've noticed and that is invisible to a lot of people. And it is a large part of what I'm talking about in other videos about how you have some instruments that are considered jazz instruments and some instruments that aren't. And it's one of those things where whenever I talk about it to anybody who has never been affected by it, they instantly go to basically say, well, stop complaining, maybe you should just work harder. Or, well, of course, that's the way it is, and there's never really any good dialogue that happens, and everything I say is just shut down right off the bat. So the feedback loop I'm talking about, and it's a lot of stuff from my perspective, and this is talking about somebody who grew up in a high school that took part in competitions and also the Texas all-state system, and other things like that. And then also I went to a college that had a jazz band. It had multiple jazz things. And then I did my doctorate at a school that has a jazz program. And the feedback loop basically is that people who play a jazz instrument have tons of opportunities to more or less learn in a very safe environment. And by this I mean, if your high school has a jazz band and you play trumpet, trombone, or saxophone, or guitar, piano, bass, drums, any percussion, vibes, whatever, then you literally just have to get into the jazz band and you can learn about jazz on the instrument you're practicing every day. And this is the part where I start to get some pushback. Whenever I say the instrument you're practicing every day, I mean, if you're a saxophone player and you're taking lessons on saxophone and you are in the high school band and you're playing saxophone, to join the jazz band, you're adding one more thing on saxophone. So, you just have to add on your jazz band music to whatever you're playing otherwise in your practice sessions on saxophone. In college, you're taking your private lessons on saxophone, and then if you want to join the jazz band or the combo, you literally just add that on to whatever else you're practicing on saxophone. And it's the same thing for trumpet and trombone. So if you are playing trumpet and you want to audition for lead trumpet in the jazz band, you just have to add lead trumpet playing, those kinds of things that you want to develop, onto your practice routine, and you can do it. So at this level, high school, early college, if you want to learn how to do jazz, you have a really easy way in. And I'm not saying that you don't have to work. I'm never saying you don't have to work, but it's literally just, if you can audition and make it in the jazz band, you have a vehicle to learn jazz. And then a lot of times it's the same thing with combo. If you join the combo, you have an easy way to learn jazz in a format. So what this leads to is you're going to have a lot of people who have access to this, and a lot of them aren't really going to develop in a really strong way as jazz musicians, because the amount of work you put into it is what you're going to get out of it, and a lot of them are basically just going to participate. And oh, my order's here. Pause one. All right, I got my order back. All right, so anyways, what was I saying? But anyway, so if you have somebody that they get into the big bands, jazz band, and they're just playing third trombone, and they don't really put a lot of work into it, or they're gonna, they're just gonna be what they're gonna be. And so you'll have people that will graduate from the system, and they may have to teach a jazz band, and they'll teach what they know, which is fine. But you'll have a lot of other people who will discover a love of jazz or any other kind of music that they play. I know there's some people that get a love of funk from playing funk charts in the big band, or they'll be doing stuff in combo and they'll develop a love of jazz fusion or whatever. But anyways, they'll be able to develop from that. All right, so now let's look at where it goes from there. Is that they've developed experience that they can now use. You know, if you are in a jazz program because you got up to a place where you can successfully be part of a jazz program, you know, maybe getting your master's in performance or arranging or composition in jazz, and then you graduate, well, you have a skill set that can transfer. You know, you can fill in and sub for the local big band, or you can, you know, be part of the scene, and it's fine and all that. But basically, there's this path you can take. And let's say you're a freshman in college and somebody comes as a guest performer. If you're a young trumpet player and you see a trumpet player on the stage, there is a path that you can see to get there. You're going to have to work extremely hard, but you can point to that person on stage and say, I want to be there. And you can get guidance that will put you there. Because, you know, I've heard so many stories of people that, like, you know, I want to be the pianist in the Jazz Messengers. That's what I want to do. And so they are working, but they're learning all the Jazz Messenger charts by ear. They're transcribing them. They're able to do that, and they're doing gigs that are adjacent to the kind of thing they want to play, and so eventually they work their way there, you know. So let's back up again and talk about this from the perspective of somebody who does not play a standard instrument. And I'm going to literally just lay my experience down here. You know, I'm a French horn player. I started on French horn, and in high school my teacher told me I needed to only play horn because she wanted me to be a good horn player and not one of those people that was okay at horn and okay at trumpet and okay at trombone, but not really able to do any of them well. And in retrospect, I am so thankful for that, because that pushed me to much better heights than I ever could have hoped to do on my own. So I wasn't allowed to audition for jazz band on trumpet because she didn't want me playing trumpet. You know, I could kind of do it over the summer. So essentially, whenever the WT summer band camp came around, you know, for high school kids, 2 weeks over the summer, I would audition for the jazz band on trumpet, and I would always be bottom of the second band because I was doing it myself. Nobody told me how to listen to jazz. Nobody told me how to play stylistically. I literally was just figuring it out on my own. And so 2 weeks out of the year were the only times I'd get to play in a jazz band, you know? And I was always frustrated because, you know, I did this for 4 years, and I was the same chair, basically, third or fourth trumpet in the second band. I never got any better. Meanwhile, on horn, I was in the top concert band. You know, I was auditioning, doing really well. I was a Texas All-State musician. I was on horn, I was like there. And it made me frustrated that all the other people in the top groups who played trumpet, trombone, and saxophone were in the top jazz band, and they're having time of their life playing the music. I was in the second band because those 2 weeks were the only time I played trumpet, you know. And so it felt kind of frustrating that, like, I was just getting left behind. And it felt like all everyone ever told me was, you'll get it, you know. So then get to college, I go to WT, you know, and the only way I was allowed to be in the jazz band or combo was playing trumpet or trombone. And I got in trouble for playing those because my horn professor was like, no, you need to practice horn. You need to be a horn player. And, you know, and that's what I wanted to do. I loved the horn. I wanted to play the horn, but there was no opportunities. And every time I'd show up to a jam session, I just wasn't cutting it. And everyone would basically, no one would actually tell me anything about how to play jazz. They'd just be, have you considered playing trumpet? And, I did play bass trombone in the jazz band, but again, I was always in the second group. I wasn't actually really learning that much because, well, I was having to fight an instrument that I wasn't allowed to practice. I never had time to practice it. I was teaching myself just almost random guessing what I should be learning. And I was competing against people that, if they wanted to try out on trombone for the jazz band, they literally just added the jazz band audition music onto everything else they were doing on trombone. If I wanted to do that, I had to do all my horn practicing, everything that I needed to do on horn. I was in the top band, I was in the orchestra, I was in lessons, I was playing in chamber groups, I was doing all this stuff on horn, and I wanted to play jazz, but the school was like, you can only do it on a jazz instrument. And so basically I would have to do all that and then find time to cram in practice on trumpet or trombone. And usually my horn professor could tell because I didn't really develop any efficiency on those instruments, so it would wreck my horn playing. I would have an audition at 1 o'clock and my horn lesson would be at 3, and it would literally be like, you've been playing trumpet again, haven't you? Or you've been playing trombone again, haven't you? Because I sounded awful on horn, because I would wreck this and it would be all swollen, and but basically I would have this thing where everybody who was playing trumpet or trombone or saxophone as a primary instrument would be making the top group and having all the fun, because all they would have to do was add it on to the practice they were already doing on that instrument. And all of the fundamentals and everything they were developing on that instrument, they already had that there. And then they would just have to add on style on top of that. Whereas I would have to completely develop technique on a secondary instrument. So I would be fighting that while learning music that was a bit above my playing level, and I would have to figure out style because nobody would tell me what I'd be listening. I'd be listening a lot. I didn't know what to listen for. And so what would happen is people would tell me, use your ears. And I would I am using my ears, but I didn't know what to listen for. And so the feedback loop is basically I had to do all of this extra work just to participate. And then all of the people around me, I'd be like, can we change this? Can we play charts? And all of the trumpet, trombone, and saxophone players would literally be looking at, we don't understand what the problem is, just get good. I had to work for my spot to play trumpet in the top band. You should have to work hard too. You work hard and you'll earn your spot. And it was literally just this most surreal thing that it's but all you practice is trumpet. Of course you're going to be up there because all you practice is trumpet. I have to do all this horn stuff, and then anytime I have left over, if this is still working right, then I can put some practice time in on trumpet. I never really got to practice trumpet or trombone ever in college just because I didn't have time. So all of that to say that the feedback loop happens because you have all of these there, and then there's anybody who doesn't play a standard jazz instrument is going to stay in classical music most of the time just because only the dedicated stubborn ones are going to break out of it. And by dedicated and stubborn, I mean the ones who don't know when to quit. So if I saw the same group that the young trumpet player did that I mentioned earlier on the stage, if I wanted up on that stage, I would have to do all of the pioneering work to create a spot, and then I could do it. And then I could go to it. But there's nobody telling me anything along the way. I'm having to figure it out. And a lot of jazz educators kind of don't really seem to understand this. And they treat it as if it's just okay, so we're not going to let anybody but a trumpet, a trombone, or a saxophone in to our combo, or our jazz band in middle school or high school. They have to play a standard jazz instrument. And then in college, they'll be well, if we ever play a chart that has horn parts, we'll ask them. But then they never program those, so it's irrelevant, And so they'll basically look at that and go, well, I guess if no horn players are wanting to do it, then it's because the horn doesn't do. And you see, kind of, there's this logic. They'll try to put something there that says, well, it's justified that it works this way because XYZ. And in reality, all of the barriers that I faced as a horn player wanting to break out of classical music, most of them have been around other people saying, no, you can't do that. You know, there was any time that I would be playing something, you know, I'd be playing, let's see, what's a try, All of Me, you know, and I didn't know what to listen for, so I'd be playing it, ta ta ta, ta 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 ta, ta ta ta, ta 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 ta, and nobody would ever tell me, hey, can you phrase it like this, you know, say it like this, you know, doop da doo doo da 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 da. Nobody would ever do that. They would always be like, oh, horns can't swing. Look at the horn player trying to swing. Ha ha. And then whenever I couldn't play in style, and I never knew the style, nobody would ever tell me. They would always tell me, oh, you should just play trumpet or quit. Play trombone or quit. But then on trombone, I would be doing the same thing. I'd be playing ta 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 ta, and nobody would ever tell me, hey, it should all be long, you know. They would literally just say, oh, you can't play another instrument either. Meanwhile, you know, I would have a lot of the stuff I'd learn would because, like, my saxophone friend would go and he'd play it the same way, you know, that very tut white bread kind of stuff. But people would go, hey man, listen once, and they'd play it, do da do da do da do da, or something like that, you know, whatever. And they'd teach him, and it would be like, okay, so all those people on the jazz instruments are being treated in such a way that they're actually taught and they're actually shown what they need to do. And all the people on the non-standard jazz instruments are literally just made fun of. You know, I would go to a jam session and I would play and they would be like, all right, good, bye. But then, you know, some saxophone would play and be honking, squawking, not playing anywhere close to, you know, good note choices. Rhythm would be whack. It would be just all over the place. And they'd be like, hey man, keep with it. Let's keep going. All right, try this now. But me and a few of my friends that played the non-standard instruments would all basically be told to go home if we were even allowed in at all. So this is the feedback loop I'm talking about, is that essentially there's a path forward and a lot of people can see that path and they kind of know what they need to work on and they're told what they need to work on and they're given guidance and all that. And so it's no wonder that you have hundreds, thousands, whatever, of trumpet, trombone, and saxophone players that are, you know, doing all the stuff that they need. And everyone's like, oh, there are no French horn players, so I guess French horn only does classical. There are no oboe players, so I guess oboe only does classical. There are no bassoon, all that stuff, you know. Meanwhile, whenever you have people who are on these non-standard instruments, can be working as hard, if not harder than other people, but because we're just kind of left to our own devices, we're literally like, we need to get into the attic, but the way we're doing it is by beating our head against the ceiling. And so it's like these standard instruments are shown, here's the attic door, go up there, whereas all the other instruments, they're looking at it and going, man, you're working real hard. And then we're just left to continue hitting our head on the ceiling until, you know, eventually we stumble to find the attic door. And then once we're up there, everyone's like, man, you know, it's really neat that you did all the work. Why don't more people on your instrument do it? And that's the feedback loop. That's it. That's hundo what it is. And a lot of educators don't understand it, and a lot of jazz musicians don't understand it. And I'm, you know, anytime I talk about this, people either are on one of two camps. They'll either be the kind that are like, you know what, you're right, let's do something to change let's do something to change pedagogy. Let's do something to include more of this stuff, let's create more educational materials. Some people are like, yeah, my jazz band, my combo is instrument agnostic. If somebody comes in on a non-standard instrument, we'll figure out a way to make it work, but they're allowed to play. And so those are the people that are usually like, I'll play something and I'll be like, man, that sucked. What are you listening for? And then I'll tell them, and they're like, oh no, man, you need to listen for this, and let me show you. And those are all one camp of people. They're the kind that it's like, I don't care what instrument you're on, you need to do the things. The people who have told me after a jam session, it's like, hey, you don't use any vocabulary. You need to go listen to vocabulary. You need to go develop your vocabulary. Here's what you need to listen for. Here's how you can transcribe that. And then the other camp are the people that it's like, nope, it has to be standard instruments only, because no professional bands, no whatever, use the non-standard instruments, so it would be a waste of time to have them. And then whenever I play in the jam session, those are the kind that'll like go home. Or the kind that it's like, hey, it's cool that you play French horn, play trumpet just to be safe. It's those kinds. And the kinds of pedagogues that are like, you can't play jazz on the French horn, you can't play jazz on the oboe or the bassoon. It just hasn't ever been done before, so you just shouldn't bother. Or, yeah, I'm sure it has been done before, but it's a novelty. If you want to actually be serious, you need to play the trumpet or the trombone. Like, you need to play a standard jazz instrument if you want to be serious. And those two camps of pedagogues are usually doing this, and the problem is a lot more from the second camp run things. So this feedback loop is basically leading to a lot of people on non-standard instruments never quite being the same level, and people judging the instrument as a result. If one saxophone player is coming up and they're just going, it's like, oh, that's a classical player, they just need to learn how to do it. But if a horn player comes up, they'll say, oh, the French horn can't swing, right? So anyways, that's kind of it. I'm sorry that this is longer, but I kind of got going and didn't want to stop. But anyways, thank you for watching this far. I don't really know if anyone actually watches these, but anyways, see you next time. Bye.